Welcome to Interviews from Mexico. I'm Laura Carlson, and I'll be your host as we look at cutting-edge issues with the men and women who know them best. Here on Telesur. Mexico started the year 2019 with a new president and a new Congress, and for the first time in decades, the left took power. Mexico City, the federal district, also starts the year with a new Congress, also for the first time ever, and again dominated by the president's party, Morena. How will this change the lives of the millions of residents in one of the world's largest and most chaotic cities? And what are the plans for changing the way that Mexico City is governed? To talk about those questions, we're very pleased to have with us today José Luis Rodríguez. José Luis, thank you for joining us here on Interviews from Mexico.
It's my pleasure to be here with you, Laura, and to help inform people about what we are doing in Mexico City's first Congress. I think that we have a lot of important work to do, especially around building a new judicial framework for our city. That's the main thing that we need to work on, our main responsibility.
Thank you, José Luis. We couldn't have a better guest to talk about these questions. José Luis is a deputy in the New Mexico City Congress, and he's also the coordinator of the Morena party in the Congress and a professor of constitutional law. Let's start out by talking about, this has been a long process to get Mexico City to this point where the federal district has its own local government, its own constitution, and yet now we're not at an end point, we're really at the beginning of what's the major task, which is governing the city. Tell us, what's at the top of the agenda?
Well, our agenda for the Morena group in the Congress has a lot to do with building a judicial framework that will create a better system for accountability in Mexico City. Also, we're drawing up a plan of austerity, a plan for law enforcement, a plan to make Mexico City a city of law, a city of liberties. That will give us the base. We need to make a plan for human rights that will guarantee opportunities and development for the population living in Mexico City. We also need to develop a working plan for participation to implement the innovative project presented by our mayor, Dr. Claudia Sheinbaum, and met the expectation of the people. And in the Morena group in the first Mexico City Congress, our main responsibility is to make sure that the fourth transformation in Mexico City will be viable.
Well, so that's a huge agenda. You're talking about accountability, austerity, and getting rid of corruption. How does this differ from what there was before? I mean, are there no laws to govern that now? Was the legislative structure insufficient? What are the changes that are needed in order to carry out that program?
Nosotros tenemos una nueva constitución.
Yeah, well, we have a new constitution that took effect on the September 17 of the last year and give us guidelines to make new laws. We need to create a new judicial system. We've already written the new general law of executive power for Mexico City, a law that gives us the foundation for a transformation of the city's administrative structure to carry out Claudia Sheinbaum's public policy reforms, now backed up by a real judicial system. Another opportunity we have was to create the new provisions for auditing and prosecuting and new judicial provisions that have to do with austerity. In December, we created the austerity law for the government and government officials in Mexico City. This austerity law sets up a system to set a maximum income for public servants, that no one can earn more than what the mayor of Mexico City earns. So we passed a salary reduction. We re-engineered our institutions to be able to work in a totally different way. We're going to make public spending transparent. We're going to create a system of accountability so that audits will be honest and real. For example, during the 5 years of the previous administration, there were 903 audits, which cost the government around 3.6 billion pesos in total. And when we got from that, the result for the community was that they were only able to detect 100 irregularities in 5 years, in a context where anyone who lives here can see that there's so much corruption. However, the auditors weren't able to detect that.
So is the problem that the audits that they did were not done properly, or is it, or was there a cover-up involved?
Well, there are a lot of different problems here, because effectively the audits related to issues that had to do with finance, the performance audits, with the exercise of public service, they didn't benefit the population. That's why it's so important to create new judicial structures that can respond to the things that happen in our city.
Well, are you anticipating then that, first of all, the major benefit will be more accountability, more transparency in city government, and that this will produce a significant amount of savings for the government?
It is important for us to set up this system for transparency, for accountability, which will allow us, as citizens, to get information in the correct way. Information is a human right, basically, and having access to it gives you the ability, as a citizen, to observe the government. And the government will be conscious of the fact that it is being observed and that it can't keep doing the same things that it used to do, that it needs to control public spending, that there need to be new mechanisms. We have to develop a different stage of organization.
So we have a change in the structure of the rules and regulations and laws that run the city in order to create this accountability, and you've also mentioned now the role of the citizens in this, that by having access to information, they can kind of be watchdogs for what happens within the city. Talk to us about the importance of citizen participation, because I know that some of the other plans that are involved have to do with opening up forums for citizen participation and other channels in which the people who live in the city can directly take part in the government itself.
It is important for us to create an environment of openness where citizens can actively participate, where citizens have the chance. We have an open parliament system, we have a different way of thinking about participation, and there are a lot of new opportunities.
And then the forums that are planned will cover not only accountability, but a range of issues, from security to corruption to
impunity,
basic services, impunity. How will those be run?
That's one of the biggest problems we have in the city. It has to do with corruption, it has to do with impunity, and it creates an environment that directly harms the quality of life of people who live in the city. Security is a priority. We need to change how we serve our citizens. Our city was handed over to organized crime in the last administration. Our city has...
That's a strong statement. So there's a huge problem with the presence of organized crime.
Sin duda.
Without a doubt. It's one of the main problems we're facing right now, security and safety. Because the participation and existence of organized crime and criminal gangs wasn't recognized, and they basically taken over in the neighborhoods. I represent District 12, and we have neighborhoods that have faced serious problems, neighborhoods like Roma Norte, like Obrera, even Condesa, even Mexico City's historic center is in a very bad situation in terms of safety. There have been increases in the rates of thefts, muggings, burglaries. Now, recently, the mayor announced the creation of a new model of citizen security. This new model of citizen security seeks to bring the police closer, to train the police, educate them. We're going to create an education system at the secondary, university, and postgraduate level that will allow us to address these problems from a scientific point of view, not just empirically. The idea is that police officers and everyone who works in security, that they have better tools to be able to solve the problem.
New technologies in crime fighting. Because first of all, there was kind of, maybe it was a myth, but there was the idea that as the war on drugs and the cartel activity was causing so much violence in the rest of the country that somehow Mexico City was immune to that. That was really the narrative that we heard for many years, and yet people were living a different situation with a fairly high degree of insecurity. But you can have these technical changes. Will there be a change in the model? Because there's been a lot of criticism lately that on a federal level, there's still pretty much, there's still going to be a high degree of militarization and confrontation in terms of how the security issue is dealt with. Are we looking at a different kind of model for Mexico City now?
Well, I think that we have a new opportunity to make things change. I think that we have an opportunity to be able to use our best ideas, our best talents to make things work differently. We need to learn from the experiences of other places, other countries. Dr. Sheinbaum has had the chance to visit other countries to learn about their experiences. Recently, she had a chance to visit some cities in the United States, some cities in Europe, and to learn about their experiences with security. Now, she'll be able to start here in Mexico City, which is an extraordinarily difficult and complex city, a very complicated city, very interesting, but very complex, very complicated. She'll be able to build a kind of urban life that will help all of us to get back our security. At one point, this city was safe during the administration of Mr. Andrés Manuel López Obrador. From the year 2000 to 2006, the situation with regard to security was different. We were able to reduce certain kinds of insecurity and crime. That situation was maintained during the administration of Marcelo Ebrard, which created a kind of an oasis in Mexico City compared to other cities in the country. In other places, there were many problems because of the war started by President Felipe Calderón, which created many complicated effects, but the city was an oasis. However, during the administration that just ended of Miguel Ángel Mancera, that was when our city stopped being safe.
Oh, that's where it's true that I remember that in the late 90s, we began to see a very serious upward trend in delinquency and in crime in the city, and it reversed. So that's a cause for optimism, and by going to these, looking at these other experiences, what I'm hearing is a lot of optimism in terms of the possibilities of changing the situation. How much optimism is there on the part of the citizenry? Because we're also in a situation where they've become so accustomed to a lack of follow-through by the police. A lot of people don't even bother to report crimes. How do you change the culture of the citizenry in order to participate in this new model?
Pues nos parece que es fundamental que
Well,
podamos
we
tener un
think that
esquema
it's
de
very important
participación,
for
de
us to have
reconocer
a
experiencias
participatory
justamente de
system
otros lugares, de
where we
otros
can learn
países
from
que tienen
experiences of other
problemas similares,
cities,
que son
other
también
places where they have faced
enormes
similar
y
problems
que
like
han
us,
logrado atender el
huge
problema
problems,
en
and they've been
distintos
able to
puntos, en
address those
distintas
problems in
medidas.
different places
Aquí
to
el
different
primer
extents.
esquema de
Here,
cambio
the first
es
plan for
un
change
esquema de
is a plan
formación
for
en materia
training the
policial.
police.
Segundo, una
Second, a plan
reestructuración de la
to
Ciudad de México. Ahora la
restructure
Ciudad de
Mexico
México se va
City.
a dividir
Right now,
en,
Mexico
se ha
City will be
dividido ya en
divided.
847
We're already
cuadrantes.
divided in
Antes
847
estaba
quadrants.
dividido en 6
Before it was
regiones.
divided into
Ahora
6
está dividido
regions.
en
Now it is divided in
847 cuadrantes que nos va a
847
permitir
quadrants.
la
This
atención
will
mucho
allow
más
security
cercana
forces to pay much
de
closer
los
attention.
cuerpos de seguridad
So
para
they
que
will
venga un
be able
esquema
to
donde
work in a
participe la
way where
ciudadanía,
citizens will
donde
be able to
participe la
participate,
autoridad a
where
nivel
officials
alcaldía
from different
y donde
boroughs
participe también
will
el
be able
gobierno
to
de la ciudad a
participate,
nivel
and
central
also the
para
central
empezar a
Mexico City
tener un
government will be
vínculo
able to
distinto,
participate,
recogiendo
will
otras
be working with
experiencias
different
que
kinds of
pueden empezar
relationship
a
based on other
priorizar
experiences
la
to be able to get
disminución de la
crime rates
incidencia
down.
delictiva en casos particulares.
Well, for example, are specific police officers going to be assigned to the different districts so that you could have a situation where I would know who my my police officer on the block was and create more of a relationship with the residents?
There are several different plans, various possibilities, but as a priority, I think we need to emphasize when we're talking about this issue and how the city government has talked about it, we're going ahead with a plan that will allow us to fight types of crime that specifically affect women. In certain parts of the city, in certain districts, in certain specific places, crimes against women and girls are on the rise. On public transportation, for example. And I think that when we start to focus our actions more clearly, we'll be able to address this issue better and make a change that will have direct effects in the quality of life through focusing our actions better.
Yeah, and it's not only just punishing the crimes, identifying and punishing the crimes, but then that becomes part of changing that culture as
Definitely.
well, so that you can actually begin to prevent those kinds of crimes of violence against women, as well as other crimes. But it's a huge challenge to gain the confidence of the population after so many years in which there was a huge gap between law enforcement and the population and the kind of level of trust that existed there. Well, I want to change to another subject that's on everybody's mind these days, which is the problem with the scarcity of gas in the city, as well as in other parts of the country, but we've certainly seen it here with the long gas lines and gas stations closed as a result of the federal government's policy of changing the distribution patterns to attack gas stealing on a national level and to a very high degree, apparently, according to the statistics. What kind of fallout have you seen in the local government to this action? There's been a lot of public criticism.
Yeah, definitely. We need to develop a different plan. Look, that the way we participated as Mexico City lawmakers has to do with just that, analyzing from our point of view what has happened. We also need to think about what kind of legal resources we have in the city. A strategy to fight crime should depend on the situation, on the opportunities, on who's participating. I think that right now we're going to have that kind of opportunity, that possibility.
To change the legal framework?
Yes.
And how does that apply specifically to this problem of the scarcity of gas right now?
I think that specifically we will have to create a plan, different model of participation that will allow us to address this problem in a different way.
I imagine that you've also had some challenges in terms of communicating to the population, explaining what's happening and to avoid a situation in which the criticism becomes the inconformity on the part of people waiting in long lines kind of overshadows the fact that there's a serious attempt to control crime going on here that could have long-term benefits.
Yes, definitely.
Do you work a lot in communication when you talk about changing the citizens' culture within the city, which is part of making the vast changes that you're talking about making here? What role does communication play?
Bueno, tenemos que generar un esquema de comunicación y de participación.
Well, we need to create a different model of communication and participation. We need to make a plan where we can be involved in a different way. There is a lot of active, intense citizen participation, but city officials haven't communicated in the right way. We also haven't had the chance to set up a system that will allow us to get closer, that will make it possible for us to really do what the Constitution says we're supposed to do, to create systems of participatory democracy, direct democracy, that have real influence in our city.
It's been the case in Mexican politics that after Election Day, a citizen has almost no contact with their representative, their so-called representative, and there's not really much communication between the people who are now in government and governing and the district that elected them. You're from District 12. Is there a new plan or a new concept of how you will open up channels between your activity in the Congress and what the people know about what's going on and how involved they can be in that?
In District 12, we have a plan for communication and participation with the population that we hope will become a system of permanent contact. I'm constantly working in my district, and every day I get reports about what is going on in every single one of our neighborhoods. I participate in the Congress, but I also participate in my district. I think you shouldn't lose the relationship between the community and the representative. A popular representative has to change the mechanism of communication and participation.
Well, we've come very quickly to the end of the program here. I want to ask you, is there any one thing that you think is at the core of this transformation, which is a very broad transformation in the government of Mexico, that we should know about?
Pues es una oportunidad justamente de transformación.
Well, it's a big opportunity for transformation and change in our city's government. And we have the chance to make this change together so that things can get better for everyone. I think it's a new start. I think that we have is the chance to imagine and create a different kind of city, and a different kind of relationship.
José Luis Rodríguez, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh no, it was my pleasure.
And thank you. We'll be back next week on Interviews from Mexico.